Again, thanks for joining us. I know you might even get tired of me saying it because I sometimes tire of hearing myself say it, but the emergency does indeed continue. The situation just seems that every day there's something new. But I am very, very grateful, as I know you are, for people like our guest. Of course, our guest is Kelly Shackelford. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with him. He's the CEO of Liberty Institute. He's been fighting the cultural wars for 25 years. I could give a long biography. Look, he's a constitutional scholar. He's argued before the United States Supreme Court, testified before the House and the Senate, won 3 state landmark First Amendment and liberty cases just in the past few years. And wherever you see religious liberty under attack, you can rest assured that he is somewhere in the mix, standing up against those attacks and fighting for our religious liberty. So, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you on. Please go ahead and take the next 7-10 minutes and share with us what's going on. And folks, I would remind you, press *6 to get in queue with questions. Please don't wait until he's finished. If a question pops into your mind, go ahead and get in queue then, so that as soon as he's done, we can put you on the line and start getting your questions in. Okay, Kelly, go right ahead.
Sure. There's certainly plenty that we could talk about. As you mentioned, I've been doing this for about 25 and a half years, and I just start out by saying the attacks on religious freedom are not just the worst I've ever seen, but it's at an exponential rate of increase, how fast these things are coming. So, and I think most people see that, feel that, and a lot of people ask, is it just because of this administration? Well, certainly this administration is not helping, and they're creating a lot more cases, but the trend line has been going the same direction for 25 years. I mean, I think most of us know the culture has been going that direction. So we're seeing a lot of these attacks that we didn't even used to see in the past. The example I'll use, and I could use any of a number, is let's even take one everybody knows about, the Hobby Lobby case, which was argued at the Supreme Court. Well, I was in the front of the Supreme Court when Paul Clement, my good friend, argued that case. And a lot of people don't know what the government argued, what the Solicitor General. This is the Solicitor General's office. This is the highest attorney in the country that represents our federal government and the president. Got up in front of the justices, and the argument was that once you engage in a for-profit business, you are making a decision to waive your religious freedoms. And you, quote, and this is what he said, are now playing by the government's rules. This was an attempt to basically just say, there's no religious freedom in the workplace for any employer out there anywhere. Now, that was rejected. But again, it was rejected by the Supreme Court 5-4. So that doesn't give you a whole lot of solace. And the fact is that this argument would have never been made even 5 years ago. It shows you how quickly things are moving. I can give you another example. There's this whole area that we're now having to take cases in, just a whole stash of these cases that we didn't used to have that have just really exploded here recently, and that is attacks on people of faith in the workplace that has nothing to do with their work or what they do on the job. So, with Hobby Lobby, you got the employer. It's happening to the employee as well. And I could give you a lot of examples. I'll give you the one. Eric Walsh, I think, is a great example. This is a wonderful guy. Eric is an African-American, PhD, MD, Director of Public Health for City of Pasadena. And it was his faith that actually led him to do this kind of public service and helping people in this way. And he was offered a job from as Director of Public Health for the state of Georgia. And, he accepted. The next thing he knew, there were some homosexual activists from California that began to call the state of Georgia and say, well, this guy, he preaches at his own church sometimes on the weekend, and you need to look at his sermons, what he thinks about marriage and what he thinks about these issues. Well, we now have copies of the emails going back and forth from these government officials. First, they demanded that he give them copies of his sermons, and then we see the email traffic. We've got those copies now of them divvying up his sermons and deciding which government officials would read which ones of his sermons. And at the end of that, they fired him. So again, I want you to understand this. This is a guy who lost his job, not because of anything he did at work, but because what he said in his own church on a Sunday. So it shows you how bad those things are. And we've got, again, a whole stack of these. We've got a guy who's editor-in-chief of the newspaper and lost his job because on his own personal blog he mentioned his faith. We've got there's just a whole rash of these. I think most people have seen the last few days the fireman, the fire chief out in Atlanta, who had written a book about marriage and sexuality from a biblical standpoint, and he's now just being attacked from all sides. Again, it's not something he did as the fire chief, it's a book that he wrote out of his faith, a private, his own personal book. So this is kind of an onslaught. And when I was visited this summer by the head barrister from the UK, who does what we do at Liberty Institute as far as religious freedom, he said, this thing happened to us about 7 years ago, and we weren't really ready. And we lost. And he said, when you lose, you don't just lose, these people lose their job, but entire professions began to say those kinds of beliefs are a danger to the profession. And he said it basically became that those of faith had to either decide all across our country that they want to be open about what they believe and who they are, or would they rather, just keep their career. And he said most of them just decided they'd just keep their career and not speak out or be involved or be who they are. He said you really lose your country at that point. So you need to win these cases. You need to win strong, and you need to really inflict pain. So the message is very clear that you don't do this in the United States of America. But again, these are cases we didn't even used to have to fight at all. We're having to. 25 years ago when I started doing this, the idea that you're going to have to represent churches. I would have laughed at you. I'd have said, we don't represent churches in the United States of America. This is the Soviet Union, having to defend the churches against the government. But now, almost every week, we get a new church we have to represent. That's just where it's gotten to. That just wants to be the church. That wants to, feed the homeless, wants to come into existence, wants to do what churches do. Big case we had about a year or so ago was a small black church in Mississippi, and all they wanted to do, they were having to turn people away on Sunday, and they just wanted to increase the size of their sanctuary. But there was an ordinance in the city that said if they wanted to do that, they were going to have to get permission from 60% of the people that lived within 3 miles of the church. Now, if you were a bar or a restaurant or a strip club or anything else, you didn't have to get that permission. There was only one entity that had to get that permission, churches. And you would think that's pretty clearly unconstitutional, but we went into federal court, had a federal judge that just didn't see the problem with it, and had to go all the way up to the Federal Court of Appeals. Good news is we won, and it's a really high-level precedent now protecting the rights of churches, but, we didn't used to have to fight over this. We just had another one of these last week, right before Thanksgiving. They tried to ban this church from the city. And we had to go into court and have a hearing, and we won the preliminary injunction that they can't do this, get rid of the church and the church school, not allow them to exist. But these are the kind of fights now that you're having to have that we didn't used to. The bad news is they're multiplying. Good news is we're winning them. And I guess I hadn't told people Liberty Institute is we're the largest legal organization in the country that focuses exclusively on religious liberty in the United States, and we represent people free of charge. And I would encourage people to go to libertyinstitute.org and get the information, look around. I'd encourage people to sign up for the emails. You'll get an email a week on kind of what's going on, what the big cases are. There are people who are on our prayer team who get one email a week asking for prayer for all the cases of something significant that's coming up that week. So I just encourage folks to get involved because a lot of this stuff they won't see. if they're not connected, and so libertyinstitute.org, O-R-G, is where our website is, where people can get information. It also lists there a lot of things about what are your rights in the public schools if you're a student. What are your rights in the military? We've had to open a whole division just for religious freedom in the military because of what's happening. And I'm not just talking about we're the ones who represent and are defending all these veterans memorials around the country that are under attack to be torn down because they have a cross or a religious symbol on them. I'm not just talking about that. I'm talking about what's going on internally in the military. We're having to defend, folks internally as well that are being attacked because of their faith. And there are groups that, have been in existence that really try to push faith out of the military. And, of course, anybody who understands history understands, you go back to George Washington, that we've had chaplains and we've had religious freedom from day one of our military. George Washington gave everybody a Bible, instituted chaplains, knew that really leaning on your faith and having that faith was crucial to most people who are soldiers. And so that continues today, but it's under an incredible assault. I don't have time to go through the hundreds and hundreds of incidents that have happened just in the last couple of years. But we had to open a whole division just for religious freedom in the military because of what's happened. One example I can give you of that is Sergeant Monk, who was a hero. He was in the Air Force and for 19 and a half years. Cleaned the blood of his buddies off his boots in Iraq as he was a medic and had patched up over 600 people. Comes back to the United States and has his lesbian commander tell him, I need you to agree with me on gay marriage. And he said, look, this is about us agreeing on the mission of the Air Force, and we can have different beliefs on these other things, and, that's what the Air Force is about. She said, no. She said, I need you to tell me that you agree with me on gay marriage. Well, he wouldn't answer the question because he knew she wasn't going to like his answer, so she relieved him of his duties after 19 and a half years. And so, he wondered, he's called us, but he wondered, look, I don't know what I can do because my pension vests at 20 years. If I oppose this, I could lose my pension for my wife, my kids, my family. And anyway, he became convicted, especially when having a Bible study with his boys a few days later. And it just naturally came up in the conversation where he said, sons, you have to be willing to stand for your faith. And when he said that, it just really convicted him. And he picked up the phone and called us. And so we have a JAG on staff, a guy who was military litigator and taught at the Naval Academy, so we know how to file things and do things properly. We did that. Well, the first thing they did is read him essentially his Miranda rights and open a criminal investigation against Sergeant Monk to try to intimidate him. Unfortunately, that didn't work. He'd already made up his mind, and by the end of this, not only was he not court-martialed with the kind of threats he got, but he actually ended up winning a Meritorious Service Award. But everybody was watching him because they knew what was happening in the military. And, unfortunately now, for guys like Sergeant Monk, there's got to be a place to turn. And so we've got an 800 number where they can call and get information. We've been representing a number of folks to make sure that freedom isn't lost for everybody in the military. It's just crucial to the future of our military. So we're having to fight a lot of battles, and I could go through any number of these in different areas. Our areas of focus are in our schools, for our churches and religious organizations, in the military, and in the public arena. And while I'm a Christian, we represent people of different faiths. We believe in religious freedom. So one of our two of our big cases right now are Jewish synagogues who are under attack, and a rabbi in one of these cases. Literally, we've got one of these cases, a rabbi was cited criminally for holding a spiritual meeting in his home with 10 people without getting a permit from the city. And this guy was literally scared. When he called us, he said, "Can I have a Hanukkah meeting in my home, or am I going to be in danger of being criminally prosecuted?" This is where he is now. We're actually in a criminal proceeding defending him, and another church, synagogue, a very similar thing. So, the attacks against the Judeo-Christian heritage of the country are certainly evident when you see, for instance, these attacks upon religious freedom, which is the very reason founders left, got on boats, and came to this country. It was for religious freedom. It's sort of the real core. It's what our founders called the first freedom, because they understood if you lose religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedom. And a lot of people don't understand that, and so they don't appreciate and understand the importance of these attacks. Look, the one thing that totalitarianism will never allow are citizens who hold an allegiance to one higher than the government.
Yep.
So whenever you see an attack on whenever you see totalitarianism come in, the first attack, the flashpoint, will be religious freedom, because those citizens who won't bow the knee to the government are going to be the ones that have to be removed first. So religious freedom, our founders understood. It's the first two clauses of the First Amendment, and they called it our first freedom, our first liberty, because they understood how important it is. And so that's why I encourage everybody who understands it to be involved, to be in prayer, to be sending information to others so that they can know what their rights are, to be financially supporting these efforts. It's very important that we not lose our religious freedom, because if we do, we'll lose our country.
Well, Kelly, thank God that you are on the front lines of it. And I'll tell you something, and everybody listening has got to feel the same way. If it weren't you, if we didn't know what we know about what is going on, the things that you're saying would almost be unbelievable. We would just say, that can't possibly be happening. Like you said, you thought 25 years ago, defend churches? I don't have to defend churches. I mean, this is America. We don't have to do that. But, you know, the thing that most struck me, that is new to me, that I'm hearing really for the first time, is the real problems that we're having in the military, things that we thought were going to happen, but we haven't heard a lot about it. But what you're saying is that the military people who are people of faith are really under a lot of pressure now because of this new LGBT agenda in the military.
Well, absolutely. I actually spoke last year at the Naval Academy and at the Air Force Academy, and something remarkable happened both times. Afterwards, you know, people, if you speak, there tend to be a line of people that want to talk to you in private, and I had that at both places. And the cadets and the midshipmen who came up to me, about half of them said the same thing to me without knowing it, which was they came up to me and they said, Mr. Shackelford, I'm a Christian, and in light of what I'm seeing happening here, should I get out of the military? And it's shocking to people who were in the military in the past that this is going on, but you know, of course, I encourage them. No, I mean, you know, we have to have you there. You're the light. You're the one that's going to make sure that things don't go the wrong way. You're the conscience. You're the truth. You've got to stand firm and do the right thing, and you know, which encouraged them. But the point is, it used to be that our military was a place where definitely, you know, Judeo-Christian values, honor, integrity, you know, all these things were very consistent, and now those things are really under assault, and we've had a lot of 3-star, 4-star, 2-star generals come to us behind the scenes and say, I want to be a part of your military advisory panel to help you get this thing turned around, because I see the direction things have been going, and we got to make sure we don't lose things.
Well, look, folks, press *6 if you have a question. Kelly, the first question I really want to ask you is this. We're hearing a lot in the news, even among conservatives, and I hear it on Fox. Oh, you know, the culture's changed dramatically. It's amazing how quickly people have changed their minds on gay marriage. And I often wonder whether people have really changed their minds en masse, or whether the intimidation factor has set in, just like the example you use of people just in this other country saying, you know what, I got to keep my job. I got to keep my career. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Do I support gay marriage? Oh, sure. Live and let live. What's your sense of it? I mean, is there this sweeping change of heart on the part of the American people, or is this a function of really an intimidation factor that's now operating in society?
No, I think that's right. I think the GLBT movement has done a really good job of taking over the airwaves and making their issue, something that really, it's hard for the regular person who's who's not maybe strong in their faith or have beliefs about this, they can easily confused as to, well, I can't hold that position, and so they've been in a culture war that they've been fighting a long time, and people are scared to speak up. Which is the opposite of our country. I mean, our country is all about people having different beliefs. And the scary thing to me is how quickly it moved from, the GLBT sort of having some victories on this issue of marriage to complete intolerance of trying to force people to violate their faith. Which is, that's just as antithetical to our country and what we're about as anything I can think of. We say, you know what, I know you don't agree with me, but that's what that's what's great about America. But now it's like whether you're a baker or a photographer or a florist or whoever else, it's not that there aren't plenty of those people to do a wedding for two women or two men that they have in the states where that's legal. They sniff around to find out the one person who has a religious conscience objection and then try to destroy them. And this is what's so frightening, is that if that would even have any thought of success in this country. But again, it kind of shows you a little bit how, like I talked about earlier, once you lose religious freedom, you'll lose all your freedom. Mm-hmm. And if the government has a right to tell the Christian to violate his conscience, guess what? They have a right to tell every citizen that they have to violate their conscience, whether they're a believer or an atheist or whoever they are. They will have just given away the powers, the keys to the powers over freedom of belief and conscience and speech and everything else to the government, and the people won't have those rights. So this is a really dangerous thing that's happening, and people, no matter what they believe, should be standing up for the right of people to hold those beliefs, to express them, and to live in a free society.
Okay, Martin, let's go to the callers.
Sure. Well, we've got a number of calls. We're going to go to caller ending in number 9082. Go right ahead, 9082.
Yes, thank you. This is Jim Kuiper from Virginia, and I am actually in Randy Forbes' Sunday school class, so I see where Randy is doing things, and I understand that. But are there any particular things that we can promote to our representatives, or especially senators, in my case?
There certainly are a lot of things. I think one of the first things to do with any representative, whether they're a state rep, a federal rep, a senator, a governor, whoever, is education. Most of them don't know that this stuff is going on, and not that they're going to read this, but for instance, if you went to libertyinstitute.org, on the website, we collected all the attacks on religious freedom around the country. We do that every year. We update it. If you were to, it's called Undeniable, the Survey of Hostility to Religion in America. If you were to print that out, it would look like a phone book. It is just incredible how many of these cases and attacks are going on, and you see immediately it's every community, every walk of life. It's an 8-year-old boy lifted out of his seat and taken to the principal's office and told to never pray over his meal again, all the way to senior citizens told that their meals are going to be taken away because they're praying over their meals and they're federally funded, and that violates separation of church and state. So it doesn't matter if you're young, you're old, in the north, the south, wherever, it's happening. So I think number one is people need to understand, and educating these elected officials of what is happening is very important. As far as legislation, there are certain pieces of legislation that are being offered. There's federal legislation, I know, that's being offered to try to protect the right of conscience for people on the marriage issue, like these things we talked about with the bakers and the florists and all this. I personally think that's sad that we have to go to legislation, because the Constitution protects this. But there are legislative, things that are being attempted to try to get those things through before public opinion, moves in maybe even a worse direction, and people don't understand freedom and freedom of conscience. So there are some pieces of legislation on that very issue of the marriage and religious freedom and conscience of people to have different beliefs on that.
Yeah, and we'll try to ferret out some of that, and I'm sure, Kelly, probably on your website, maybe people can find out about some of that. Let's go to the next caller.
Yes, caller number 1462. 1462. Go right ahead.
We are aware of some situations in churches now because of the legalization of the homosexual marriages in Virginia. There are pastors who are being asked for the first time to perform marriage ceremonies for homosexuals, and we know a number of denominations are really struggling with this. We're aware of one situation where the pastor has pretty well decided he needs to go ahead and do it, but his church, at least half the church, I'd say, is just heartbroken over it, and they all say they don't have the courage to say anything publicly, so everybody's thinking they're the only ones, and it's just started coming out that they're not the only ones feeling this way, but unless something happens quickly, this ceremony is going to take place, and it's pretty devastating, I think, when you feel like the uncleanness is being openly brought in to the church, and of course they're saying, oh, but the loving thing to do is this, and they can't help it, it's in the genes, and they're honoring their commitment to each other that's been for decades, and that sort of thing. But what can we do in the church when we feel like we don't even have the right to be protected there anymore?
Well, yeah, the reality is, the truth is that no pastor in the United States of America has to perform a wedding against their faith and their conscience and their beliefs. So certainly this pastor is under no obligation to do this. I would imagine if 4 women and 1 man came and said they wanted to be married, that the pastor would say no to that, and no matter what the law was. So it is a matter that there is the freedom. Now, you can't force people to do something. So I mean, if he wants to do that, then that's up to that pastor to perform whatever kind of ceremony he wants to perform. But I would think that would have repercussions in the church, because I certainly wouldn't want to follow a pastor who wouldn't follow the Scripture. And so that's what you have to do, is you get a new pastor, you go to another church, but this is the sad thing. And I know, Bishop, you definitely talked about this before, but there's not really a great chance of turning our country around if the pastors aren't willing to lead and aren't willing to show courage and to do what men of Scripture for thousands of years have done, which is stand in obedience to the Lord and do the right thing. You're never going to turn things around if the pastors aren't willing to stand up and make a difference. And of course, we've seen all the great examples in Scripture of pastors and prophets and others who stood and spoke the truth, and things did turn around. And we've also seen things like what the church did in Nazi Germany, which was kind of be co-opted and go along to get along and be a part of something eventually that was very, very, destructive and evil. And so, I just pray for our pastors that they have courage. And I'll say this, the great thing is any of these pastors who have any issue, they feel like they're being threatened legally in any way, all they have to do is call us. We not only have our office, but we have hundreds of the top litigators at the top law firms in the country waiting, wanting to be able to serve the church in this way if there's any sort of threat. So we can answer their questions and all that, but if there is a threat of litigation of any sort, there is nothing for them to worry about, because we certainly have a team all over the country and can have that team put together pretty quickly for any violations of the law of religious freedom of the pastor or the church.
Okay, let's take one more call, Kelly, and I know we'll let you go, but thank you for taking the time. Go right ahead, Martin.
Sure. Caller number 1774. Caller 1774. Go right ahead.
Well, this is Mike Valerio, and thank you, Kelly, for all you do. And we have civil rights laws and against blacks and hate speech laws against gays, and why can't we go to Congress to pass new laws to protect the freedom of religion amendment and to protect all Christians against the harassment that we are now experiencing from the ACLU and other atheists?
Yeah, and the answer first is we shouldn't have to. That the Constitution already protects this, but you're right that there are statutes and laws being passed to try to provide protection that is needed because the court isn't properly interpreting the Constitution, and they're basically sort of erasing a lot of freedoms in some of these cases. The most popular thing passed in the states, and a number of states have this, is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. There's also a federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which applies to protecting you against the federal government, but it doesn't apply to the states. So that's why many of the states have passed these. Unbelievably, recently, those things have become controversial because the gay rights groups all rise up against religious freedom because they're scared it'll give somebody a right to disagree with them on their agenda. And so they're harder to pass than they used to be. But those laws are excellent. They patterned after how we've approached religious freedom in this country for 100 years. And it's the way it's always been until we had a couple of decisions that were really poor at the Supreme Court that pulled back on religious freedom protection. But I think 28 states, if I'm not mistaken, passed these laws. And I think it'd be great if more and more could pass those laws. And again, ultimately, it would be best if we would have the victory because the courts would interpret the Constitution correctly. And the more of these cases that we're doing, I think we're getting closer and closer to moving that back to the way the founders had it. That's our whole goal at Liberty Institute, is to get back to the religious freedom that the country was built upon. And again, we've won way over 90% of our cases, and because the law's on our side, the history's on our side, we just have to be willing to stand up, and we can win these cases, and we can reconstitute these precedents that are really going to protect all of us and make sure that there's protection for people to live out their faith and speak the truth, just like our founders intended. And again, the best thing for people to keep up with that, I encourage people, go to libertyinstitute.org, sign up for the weekly alerts that we send out, and share that with other people and inform more people. The more people that we get involved in this, I think the easier it'll be to turn the ship around and make sure we're going in the right direction.
Well, Kelly, let me tell you something, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Listening to you gives me a great deal of hope. It really does. I mean, knowing that there are people like you out there on the front lines is very encouraging. I mean, I've known you out there, but having an opportunity to hear you talk about these issues and the work that you're doing is very, very encouraging to us. Look, we're going to be praying for you, and I hope everybody will go to the website. Let's give it to us one more time.
libertyinstitute.org.
Folks, you couldn't find a better organization to be supporting at a critical time like this. So, Kelly, I'd like to have you come back maybe 2 or 3 times a year and just update us on what is going on and to continue to follow this, because it's been a very, very interesting call. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate your ministry as well, and your willingness to speak up and to not be intimidated, like one of the other callers was mentioning. Somebody unfortunately was being intimidated.
Amen. Well, you too, brother. You too. All right.
All right. God bless.
Okay. God bless. Now, thanks again. Well, folks, Kelly Shackelford, one of the heroes of the faith, really. You know, it's so encouraging to me to know that folks like him are out there. And they're out there just pounding away at it. And even though over the last 25 years he said that he's seen the culture moving in the wrong direction, you know, to me it's like a big ship. Once it starts moving in the wrong direction, it's not easy to turn it around. And you may not even notice that it's shifting. But I believe over time, if we keep at it, we're going to see the ship of state begin to turn. We're going to notice it. It's going to be discernible. We just have to keep fighting. Let me say a couple of things, folks. One is I was really taken by Joyce's comments about this pastor who has decided he is going to perform gay marriages. And let me just be blunt about that. The only reason why any pastor in America will perform gay marriages is because he wants to. He wants to. For those who actually know God and understand the history of Christianity, and understand, Kelly mentioned World War II and Hitler and Nazism. Dietrich Bonhoeffer gave his life along with others who gave their lives rather than bow their knee to Adolf Hitler. when many in the church were doing that. I believe we got a lot of people in the churches today, folks, who have a religion, but they don't have a relationship. In other words, they know about God, but they don't know the God of the Bible. And therefore, when pressed, the reality of their surroundings is greater than the reality of their commitment to God. You know, I've said this many, many places. If you've heard me speak, you may have heard me say it. I don't believe that God calls most Christians to give their lives. In other words, to actually die for the cause of Christ. But I believe he calls every Christian to be willing. He calls every Christian to be determined that if that's what it comes down to, that's what we will do. How in the world are we going to do that when we're afraid of offending somebody or afraid the government won't like what we're doing and we buckle for that reason? We're supposed to be willing to give our lives, not just offend people or offend the government for taking a stand for the truth. So I would say to Joyce, and I would say to all of you, and this is hard medicine, but let me just say it. I think in a situation like that, if you've got a church council that called a pastor in and that pastor has now decided to act in violation of Scripture, you got to get rid of him. You got to kick him out. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, I think that's a horrible thing to contemplate, but I think sometimes it's absolutely necessary. And if you're in a church where the pastor really is in full control, maybe he's founded it or he's been there so long that he's in complete control, you got to get out of there. You just got to go. You just got to find a church that's going to be going to adhere to the truth and speak up for the truth, where you don't have to feel like you've got to sit under something that you know is a lie. And here again, folks, this is tough, but, you know, I think we are coming down to a dividing time in our country. Sadly, I don't like that idea. I mean, I want us to be one nation under God, but for those who won't come under God, then they'll just go under, as Ronald Reagan used to say. I can't unite with people who are against God. I just can't do it. But for those who are committed to the faith of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, I can stand with them. I don't care what it means. I don't care what it takes. Because after all, our ultimate reward is eternal, not temporal. So I would just say to Joyce and to all of you, if you're in those situations, it's one thing to be in a church where a pastor knows what's right, preaches it kind of from the pulpit, but doesn't really want to comment directly. Well, you can pray for him and maybe he'll come around. But when you're in a church where a pastor says, no, I'm going to perform gay ceremonies, no, I'm going to go along with the culture, you've got a major problem, and you've either got that, either the pastor's got to go or you've got to go. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. So that's the first thing I wanted to say to you. The second thing is this, folks. Listening to Kelly Shackelford says one thing to me: awakening. Awakening. We have got to have an awakening in the United States of America. We've got to. We've got to. Something that will infuse courage into the hearts of those who are faint. Something that will give clarity to those who are confused about what they should be doing. Something that will tear down these walls of race and cultural differences that this president and the Attorney General and Al Sharpton are using to divide us. Something that will bring us together in our common faith and common commitment to God and to this nation. We need an awakening, and we need it desperately, desperately. And folks, that's what Stand is going to be focused on. We started last year reaching out to pastors across the country. We're going to continue to do that with a view toward bringing about an awakening. We need people coming back to church. We need pastors standing up boldly in the pulpit declaring what thus saith the Lord rather than what thus says the New York Times or what thus says Obama or what thus says Eric Holder or what thus says Al Sharpton. We need people saying, this is what God is saying. This is what the Bible says. This is what I stand on. This is what we're committed to. Folks, that's what built the greatest nation on earth. And if we walk away from that, we're going to lose this great nation. And I just refuse to let that happen. I refuse to let that happen. It will not happen on our watch, period. It just won't. If we have to be the last people standing, and by your presence on this call, I know that you all are folks who stand. If we have to be the last people standing in this country out of 315 million, if it's just us, then we will stand until we breathe our dying breath. But we will never give in. We will never give up. We will never back down. God has been too good to us. He's blessed us. I don't care what they're saying in Ferguson or anywhere else where they're holding these protests. I don't care what they say about my beloved country. This is the most wonderful nation the world has ever known. And every single person here, as Dr. King said, from a base black to a treble white, ought to be thanking God every day of your life that you live in America and that you are an American. It's one of the greatest blessings, one of the greatest gifts that any human being has ever known. The freedom, the opportunity to pursue our God-given gifts and talents and dreams. And people running around burning the flag and tearing up buildings and setting fires and shooting at police. And folks, that's not the future of our country. Thank God Barack Obama's not the future of America. Neither is Eric Holder. Neither is Al Sharpton. The future of America is in a different kind of leadership. I'm not sure who that next president will be, but I certainly see that kind of leadership arising. If you all have been watching Fox, you've seen a number of black spokespersons come out and categorically condemn what they see happening. Condemn it. I feel the utmost sympathy for the Martin Brown's mother, his father. I mean, look, losing a child can't be easy. I don't care how it happens. I don't care how bad the kid is. It cannot possibly be easy or a pleasant thing. But Michael Brown was a lawless, thuggish young man, and he brought this on himself. Now, that's a sad commentary, but it's true. He robbed a store, strong-arm robbed a store, and then wrestled with a police officer over his gun. And this is supposed to be Rosa Parks or Emmett Till? I don't think so. And folks, 93% of the black people who die in America, you all have heard this statistic. You don't really need me to recite it, but 93% of the black men who die in America are killed by other black men. And the overwhelming number of there's only, I think, depending on who you listen to, 13% black folks in America. I think the white population in America is just at about 50% now. The demographics of our country, 63% are changing. But there are more murders of black people than there are of white people, when black people are about 1/5 the population of white Americans in this country. How does that work? I think Charles Barkley, who I sometimes have issues with, but Charles Barkley had it right when he said, if it weren't for the police in these neighborhoods, it would be the Wild, Wild West. Thank God for the police. Thank God for them. We're going to preserve this constitutional republic, folks, with people like Kelly Shackelford, people like you, on the front lines. You know, no matter what you're doing, being on this call, I heard somebody mention my Congressman Randy Forbes, supporting someone like him, getting out there, being involved. We're going to save this republic person by person, pastor by pastor, church by church. We're going to save this republic. I am committed to that idea, folks. That's what fuels me. That's what drives me. That's what keeps me going. We are going to save this republic. We are going to have a nation that is pleasing in the sight of God. I don't care what these idiots out here do. I don't care what they say. I don't care how far away from God they try to take us. We're going to have an awakening in this nation. I need your help. I need your help. On Thursday at noontime, we're having a ministers' call for ministers and Christian leaders to follow up with the people that we met around the country, to talk to them about an awakening, to talk to them about what we need to be doing as pastors. If you know a pastor who is on the same page, You've probably gotten that information. If you haven't, contact Martin. We'll make sure that you get it. Any pastor of like mind, we want on this call with us to talk about how we save our beloved country. And by the way, folks, it shouldn't have to be said, but let's say it anyway for any spies who are listening, because we do get media and spies on the call. We love our fellow citizens. We care about them. But when they're trying to lead this nation away from God, they are wrong. They're wrong. And they will destroy America if they succeed at it. And we cannot let them do that. And we're not going to shoot them or stab them or kill them. Unlike a lot of these liberals, we're not even going to try to destroy them. We're just going to try to defeat them by winning the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens. That's how we're going to win. We're going to win on the high road of moral excellence, as Dr. King used to say, not the low road of hatred. We will never let anyone make us stoop so low as to hate them, even though they try pretty hard to get us there, don't they? but we're not going there. So, folks, stay in this fight. Stay in this fight. Again, Thursday at noon, we're having a national conference call with ministers taking a stand, I'm calling it. Ministers taking a stand. You know somebody out there, he's all alone, and he's standing up, and he's not part of any fellowship, and maybe sometimes the pastors around him don't even want to look in his direction because they say, this guy, I don't need the kind of flack he's getting. Tell him about our call. Have him call in, because together, united, we're going to stand. So, folks, God bless you. Keep up the fight. We cannot be defeated if we will not quit. By the way, Congressman Randy Forbes, since he came up, will be our guest next Tuesday at noontime. So be sure to tune in. He's another warrior on the front line of religious liberty in this country. You won't want to miss that one. So God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.